Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks so much for tuning in. In today's video, I'll be focusing on the steering system in the '89 Chevy S10 because one of my primary goals with building this truck was to just improve the overall driving experience. After this thing is done, I didn't want it to just feel like an old S10 with a V8, so that's why I've put as much effort as I've put into things like the suspension and everything else that's gone into it so far. But the steering also plays a really big part of that. The heart of what I'm doing is going to be installing a brand new quick ratio steering box that should not only make this thing way more responsive, but also improve steering feel and just, make it more fun, I guess. So along with installing all of that stuff, I'm also going to be swapping in a GMC Typhoon leather steering wheel just for a little bit of fanciness, I guess. I've also got my V8 swap headers to put on, and I'll probably knock out some other stuff in the process as well. If you haven't had a chance to check out the last episode yet, I put a link in the description box below. It's definitely one that you don't want to miss because I got the V8 back together for the most part and reinstalled in the truck. There was a lot of really important things that I talked about, including some new swap parts to make all of this a bit easier. I also had to do some modifications to the accessory drive. I talked about all of that and more. So again, link is in the description box below. As a lot of you already know, I've been filming a handful of these S10 videos at the same time just to highlight specific portions of the build that I feel like you guys would find interesting. So the steering system is actually a video I started a while back before all of this stuff was redone, before the frame was pretty and yada yada yada. So first off, I'm actually going to take it back to before all that stuff was done so I can show you how the steering setup comes apart. Then we'll come back to present day and start putting on all these fancy parts and just, making good progress. Before we begin, I'd like to extend a huge thanks to O'Reilly Auto Parts for all of their continued support. If you guys are knee-deep in some projects or need to get some maintenance done on your daily driver, check out O'ReillyAuto.com and take advantage of the exclusive discount code SAABKyle20, which gets you 20% off of purchases of $100 or more. I put a link in the description box below. And so, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I already took out the tie rods when I did the front suspension teardown, so all I have left to remove is the pitman arm, the idler arm, and the center bar that connects the two. To make things a little easier, since I am replacing the steering box, I'm going to leave the pitman arm attached to it and just undo the portion that attaches to the center bar. The steering shaft itself is bolted in two spots. In the lower portion, you have this plastic dust cover that you have to first get out of the way, and then you can see the bolt right there. This right here is called the rag joint. It's like a steering shaft insulator. If you have a lot of play in your steering, of course the steering gearbox could be getting worn out, but more times than not, it's going to be a worn out rag joint because it's rubber with corded portions just to give it some extra rigidity. So you can replace these. It's not the most fun thing in the world. I did it on the 93 Jimmy a while back, but something to check out. The steering shaft I'll be swapping in this truck is technically sold for LS swaps, but what's really nice is that it eliminates the rag joint, so you have a direct mechanical linkage from the steering box all the way up to the steering wheel. And I wanted to improve steering feel of this truck to a significant degree, so I think that will definitely do the trick. The other bolt for the steering shaft is right up there. The steering box I'll be swapping in this thing is a Borgeson Street & Performance unit that features a 12.7 to 1 quick ratio. Now, I can't remember right off what the S10 stock steering ratio was, but 12.7 to 1 is a pretty significant upgrade. What's really nice about this particular unit is that it's a direct replacement for the old style Saginaw Delphi 800 series, which is a very common steering box used in many GM vehicles over the years, I think since like the mid-1960s. This is one of the easiest, simplest steering upgrades that you can do. A lot of people do this to older muscle cars, C10s, the list goes on and on. The stock steering setup in this truck was very comfortable, very smooth, and very relaxed, but when you start building something more performance-oriented, that's not exactly the ideal combination. The other really nice thing about this Borgeson box, aside from having a quicker ratio, is that it's also supposed to improve feedback significantly to kind of bring the steering up to the modern standards of what you would expect out of a sports car, like a nice, firm, tight feel. Before I can install my new steering shaft, I have to first install the headers because the driver's side header is designed to where the steering shaft will pass through it. So if I put the steering shaft on first, I'll have to take it back off or at least undo part of it to be able to slip the header on. So it's easier just to get the header on first. The headers that I'm using are silver ceramic coated Sanderson headers, and they're supposed to be really, really good when it comes to fitment. You don't even need gaskets. You just put on some RTV. I used high temp RTV just because of where it's located. Allow it to cure, torque everything down, working from the inside out. So I'm excited to see how these are going to work out. As far as the steering shaft itself, I'm actually using one from Hooker Blackheart that's designed for LS swaps for, just the added clearance that it'll provide. But the reason I'm using it in my truck is because it eliminates the rag joints. So I'm able to create a more direct relationship between the steering wheel and the steering box without having the corded rubber isolator, which can go bad, and I've replaced them before. It's not fun whatsoever, and this is a very easy install. Some of you probably noticed in the last handful of clips that I ended up making a ton of progress off camera. There were some videos that I did want to film on the reassembly process, but like you guys, I really just want to see this thing fire up, and I have a ton of content planned for this truck already. And since I'm still learning about all of this stuff and I'm trying to do as much of it by myself, it was just a lot easier and less stressful to turn the camera off and just take some personal time to figure all of this out. And I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty awesome. I still have a lot of work to do, but I feel so much better with where everything is at right now. I ended up having to do a bunch more adjustments. I actually raised the engine up to the higher position on the motor mount adapter kit, so it's sitting about a half-inch higher than before, but I had to do that because the headers were hitting the control arms and stuff, so I had to create a little bit more space. And it ended up, I think, making things fit just a little bit better overall. So, it's trial and error, figure it out as you go. But I've got the accessory drive finished, there's a bunch of other stuff that's been put on, and the fuel system is almost finished up. I ended up deciding to get rid of the electric fuel pump that's in the tank from the factory back there because it's really hard to service those if they ever go bad, and I figured I would just eliminate one more electronic. So I am running a mechanical fuel pump. It's one of the videos that I wanted to film but ended up not, so if you'd like some more information on how I've set up the fuel system, I can talk about it in its own video or a part of another video. Just comment below. If you have any questions, any video ideas, or anything like that, I will try to accommodate the best I can. The last thing I've got to do up here is reassemble the steering linkage. So the pitman arm, the idler arm, the center link bar, as well as the tie rods. Almost finished. It is amazing how much this thing is transformed. So clean. Now, let's get the tie rods on. When replacing tie rods, it's always a good idea to measure the old tie rods first so you can get the lengths kind of close to where they were before. That way the alignment won't be super off, but I honestly forgot to do that this time. But obviously the truck's going to have to be fully aligned because everything is new. But at least for the sake of this video and getting the truck buttoned back together, I think I've got it pretty close. Alright, pretty much everything with the suspension and steering is now finished. Once the truck gets back on the ground and there's a proper load on the suspension, I'll be able to torque down all of the bushings, but I went ahead and torqued down everything with the steering. All of the grease fittings are in place, the cotter pins are in place, everything looks so nice. My goal for the interior of this truck is to achieve an OEM Plus atmosphere. Kinda like what I did with the 93 GMC Jimmy project, but we're going to go a little bit further with this one and have even more fun. That being said, I want to do just the right amount of upgrades to freshen the interior and bring it up to the 21st century, but I also want to preserve as much original character as I can. That being said, I have a lot of really cool ideas that I can't wait to share with you guys, especially what I'm going to end up doing for seats. But anyway, this 2-spoke urethane steering wheel is actually in phenomenal shape considering it's 30 years old, but it's a little bit on the plain side. So I could not pass up the opportunity to pick up this full leather-wrapped steering wheel from a GMC Typhoon. It was one of those right time, right place kind of scenarios, but I cleaned it and conditioned it thoroughly with Lexol products and it turned out fantastic. I also replaced the GMC horn emblem with one from an S10 that says Chevrolet, so it's going to match fantastic. The neat thing about this steering wheel, unlike the 4-spoke steering wheels that eventually came out in Jimmys and S10s and Blazers and whatnot, the Typhoon's spokes were curved, and again, it's completely wrapped in leather, so it's a factory part. It's going to be really easy to install, and I think it's going to do a lot with spicing up this interior. While I'm replacing the steering wheel, there's also a couple other things I'm going to take care of. Item number 1 is the hazard switch. It is broken off, so I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to have to take the steering wheel lock plate off and get all in there. Hopefully not, but we'll see. I'm also going to be replacing this turn signal stalk with one that does not have a cruise control button because I'm obviously not running cruise anymore, so it'll just be a simple thing that controls the high beams and wipers and whatnot, and yeah, it should be pretty simple. Well, the steering wheel ended up being a little too difficult to try to pull off by hand, so I just ran down to the local O'Reilly and grabbed a steering wheel and lock plate remover kit, which should make this a lot easier. And that's it. Well, I learned something new today, and I am very thankful for it. On the Jimmy, I had to use the lock plate removal tool to press it and unscrew screws and all that kind of stuff, and this one has like a metal and plastic cover that just pops off. There's a little clip right there that you remove, but it just slides right off the steering shaft. It's so easy, thank goodness, because I'm going to have to take out this turn signal switch cluster to replace that hazard switch, but this is a lot easier than it could have been. So I did this same thing in the Jimmy interior restoration video, which is why I'm not going into crazy detail with the whole process, but I remember in that video I actually depinned that plug that's all the way down there, which that one broke trying to take out. It's the old one anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I depinned everything and put the wire harness through the column to just make the reassembly a little bit easier, but I actually didn't need to do that this time. I took a couple really long 1/4 inch extensions and my nylon hammer and just gently tapped that plastic connector back through the column down underneath the dash. So it worked out. I'm going to hook everything back up now, replace that hazard switch, get that done, and then we can get this all buttoned up. That's where the connector plugs in underneath the column. Sweet. And last but not least, this steering wheel looks awesome. It is a major improvement in my opinion. However, I have noticed one little problem. That gap between the column trim and the back of the steering wheel. The 2-spoke steering wheels have this plastic trim that comes off the back of the wheel. That trim fills up that gap. This is a newer steering column in a 93 S10. Between the lock plate that's in there and this 4-spoke steering wheel, the gap is much less noticeable. At the end of the day, the gap really isn't that big of a deal. The only way you would ever truly notice it is if you intentionally looked for it. If I wanted to have another leather-wrapped steering wheel, my only other option is one from a Cyclone, which is going to be just about near impossible to find, and they're probably stupid expensive. So I think I'm just going to rock out with this one and maybe even get the leather restored just to bring it back to like new quality. We'll see. Now there were, I believe, some S10 Blazers and S15 Jimmies that also had leather-wrapped 2-spoke steering wheels, but the Cyclone, like the Typhoon, was completely leather-wrapped, including the spokes. The Cyclone also had grip bolsters across the side, which is pretty nice. Before I close the video out, let me give you guys one more update as to what's happening up front. Before I started filming the steering wheel stuff, my camera batteries actually died, so while they charged, I had to kill a little bit of time. So I decided to go ahead and get the core support back together. A lot of you saw the video that I made of doing all of the core support modifications to tuck my fans, radiator, and condenser to where I would still have plenty of room for the accessory drive and I would be able to retain air conditioning. This turned out really, really good. I got the core support and all of the brackets that I made powder coated a satin black. I've got all brand new hardware and there's tons of weather stripping and rubber isolators to ensure there will never be any metal on metal rubbing. It is as tight as can be. The latch fits perfect. And there's actually still enough room in here to be able to service the serpentine belt without taking out the fans. Taking out the fans is not hard and it would make things easier, but if I was just being lazy, I've already done it and it works fine. In case any of you are wondering about my radiator hose setup, let me shine a little bit of light on that because it took forever to figure this out. I went down to O'Reilly and me and the guys were like searching the shelves forever trying out different hoses and stuff. But this upper radiator hose is actually from a Camaro Z28. My original plan for this hose was to run one alongside the alternator across the backside between the valve cover and then into the thermostat housing, but I just could not find a hose that I could make work that was that specific. So because I'm running electric fans, I don't have to worry about a mechanical fan right here. So I didn't even think originally about putting something here. So this hose cannot fit any more perfect. This is literally perfect. I did not cut the hose or anything. I got a Mr. Gasket thermostat housing that has like a slight incline to it and you can swivel it. So I was able to put this exactly where it needed to go to run right in the middle and directly through the middle here. There is no way any of this stuff will contact that hose. I am just amazed. There's another angle so you can see just how dead on parallel this hose is with the core support and that belt. Fantastic. A blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then. Don't ever forget that. As far as the lower radiator hose, that is actually from an 86 Corvette. I did have to cut maybe 4 or 5 inches off of the front portion, but it went up to the radiator, went up to the water pump, no issues. To be honest, this build has been a lot more stressful than I've made known on camera, just because it's the first real build that I've ever done, like something to this extent, total powertrain swap and all these mods and everything. It's just a lot to swallow at one time for someone who doesn't have a ton of experience, but I think I've done a pretty dang good job, if I do say so myself. It is an incredible feeling seeing all of these parts come together and things actually starting to fit and things looking really, really good. I don't like making promises as far as progress is concerned, because there always seems to be a wrench that gets thrown into the mix, but I do not think I'm very far off from firing this thing up. Oh boy, it's going to be exciting. Well, everyone, that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope y'all enjoyed. Please don't forget to leave a like below. It really helps the video a lot. Of course, a massive thanks to O'Reilly Auto Parts for supporting the content, and a big thanks to you guys as well for subscribing and keeping up with the videos. None of this would be possible without all of your engagement and comments and all of that stuff, so thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so, because there's always a lot more content where that came from. So that being said, I will see you guys on the next one. Take care.